Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today we're traveling back to World War I for the Fields of Verdun. This is by Sabaton and it is one of my more popular remaining requests for a Sabaton song. I thought we'd go ahead and get this one out of the way. I think it'll be a great one. We just recently did a video on the French mutiny in World War I, so I think it's a timely topic in terms of what we've been talking about. And we're just going to go ahead and get into this. As always, I will include a link to the original video with Sabaton down in the description below. As of last week, I've also started getting a copy of the lyrics because I am hard of hearing. People didn't like me watching the lyrics video so much. So we'll do the official music video, and I will have a copy of the lyrics, so if I'm having trouble understanding it, at least I'll know what they're talking about, and I can comment on it a little better that way. And let's just do this. Here we go. This has shell shock written all over it already. And that would have been one of the main terms at the time, shell shock. That term has changed. Every war seems to have a new version of it. Battle fatigue, PTSD, it's all the same thing.
As the drum roll started on that day, 100 miles away, a million shells were fired, and the green fields turned to grey. The bombardment lasted all day long, yet the forts were standing strong. Heavily defended, now the traps been sprung and the battle's begun. Descending to darkness, 303 days below the sun. Fields of Verdun, and the battle has begun. No way to run, father and son, fall one by one under the gun. Thy will be done, and the judgment has begun. No way to run, father and son, fall one by one. Fields of Verdun, though a million shells have struck.
All right, we're going to back up. We're going to break some of this down. Very great start. I like that they started with shell shock because World War I in particular is known for this. There have been other words here in the wars. Here in the United States, we often associate Vietnam with similar issues. But World War I is where it really comes into play. We start seeing it on a national stage, international stage, actually, I should say. It becomes much more recognizable, and it makes sense in the context of World War I and the prolonged trench warfare that had to be hell to live through. So here we go.
As the drum roll started on that day, 100 miles away, a million shells were fired, and the green fields turned to grey.
That's not an exaggeration. They absolutely estimate that upwards of 1 million shells were fired in the first day at Verdun. The drum rolls were heard 100 miles away. The sounds associated with battles could be very interesting. Yes, you could hear them that far away. There were also things talked about in World War I in particular called acoustic shadows, where in one spot you could see the explosion, the fighting clearly going on. You couldn't hear it. And then in other places, even further away, it was distinctly heard. So there was some very strange phenomena going on there, acoustic phenomena. They were called acoustic shadows. But by and large, it was nonstop shelling bombardment. A lot of the movies you'll see you have it periodic firing. It wasn't like that. It was nonstop. Um, the shell explosion would have sounded more like machine gun fire than just your boom, boom. It would have been just boom, 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 boom. It would have been terrible. A million shells in the course of a day. That gives you an idea, right? The green fields turned to gray. Yeah, no man's land. These areas were blasted into huge craters. Extensive damage was done. There's an area in France to this day, the Zone Rouge. It is the red zone. It is an area where they still have problems building and farming and things like that because of mined and unexploded ordnance in the fields of France. Terrible stuff. The forts were standing strong. They were heavily defended. They did have some notable, especially around Verdun, they had some notable forts that were largely underground. Let's see. Descend into darkness, yeah. Descend into darkness, that's got a lot of potential interpretations, right? The literal interpretation of descending into the trenches, where you're in shadows all the time, you're literally descending into the darkness. But also that constant shelling is going to produce an unending wall of smoke and dust. Visibility is going to be horrible during these battles when this shelling is going on. Sometimes they will take advantage of that. You'll hear people talking about this rolling artillery bombardment in preparation for a charge over the top. Part of the purpose of that was to remove obstacles between the two areas, the two trench lines, things like barbed wire and so on, and mines for that matter. But it was also to provide cover. You get all this smoke and dust coming up. If you time it right, you can have your troops move off into that field of smoke and dust and get much closer to the enemy line before they're even able to see you. And think about that from the defensive position. You're in these dark holes. There's just unending bombardment going out in front of you. You've got reduced visibility, and you know at any minute people can come running out of that smoke and dust right at you. Psychologically, it's no wonder so many people suffered during this period. They also mentioned something about nowhere to run, father and son fall one by one. World War I, especially in the early years, was very multi-generational. You had a lot of old guard soldiers from previous wars serving, as well as young new recruits. There were entire families that were wiped out, fathers and sons, quite literally. I don't know how many served together, but that didn't really matter. Whole families served, all the male people in the family line. So you could absolutely have fathers and sons dying together in this war. This was a very, very, like I've said this in other videos, if I had to pick one world war to really deep dive into, it'd be World War I, not II. The only thing that really interests me in World War II is the Siege of Leningrad. The rest of it, not so much. I've always been fascinated by Leningrad, though. World War I, all of it fascinates me. It's such a different war than everything that came before and everything that came after. The transition war between the old school fighting and the modern fighting. It's a war where they're trying to figure out how to deal with all this new technology.
The bombardment lasted all day long, yet the forts were standing strong. Heavily defended, but the traps been sprung and the battle's begun. Descend into darkness. 303 days below the Sabaton Fields of Verdun. And the battle has begun. No way to run. Father and son, fall one by one. Under the gun, thy will be done. And the judgment has begun. No way mud and they quickly start to flood. That's the way it's in every corner. It's the guy in the mud for the treasures of blood. Descend into darkness. 303 days below the sun. Fields of Verdun. And the battle has begun. Nowhere to run.
All right, we're back into the chorus, so let's go back and get this verse. I'll be right back.
Father and son, all one by one, Fields of Verdun. The 1,000,000 shells have scarred the land. No one has the upper hand. The ground above the trenches, where the soldiers make their stand.
So, though 1,000,000 shells have scarred the land, no one has the upper hand. That's trench warfare in a nutshell, right? This inability to advance and couldn't retreat, but you also couldn't advance. It was just too dangerous. The avenues of retreat, not only were you not supposed to retreat, it was dangerous. And advancing was even worse. No one had the upper hand. That's absolutely accurate. That's why we have these long periods of stalemate. From the ground above the trenches where the soldiers make their stand, as the trenches slowly turn to mud and then quickly start to flood, death awaits in every corner as they die in the mud, fill the trenches with blood. Yeah. So, trench warfare, that's all accurate. There was so many dangers associated with trench warfare above and beyond the obvious being out there in a battle, right? Flooding was a real risk, especially during rainy periods. And not just the water rising, but the walls of the trenches could collapse due to moisture. That could lead to exposure, to vulnerability. It could also lead to, there were incidents of people being buried in collapses, both due to shelling and due to things like, weather, mud collapses. They do talk about 1,000,000 shells scarring the land. That's one thing that is not often talked about or seen in a lot of the movies, but the land between trenches, no man's land, was heavily pockmarked with craters. Some of these could be quite deep. Even if you take out the landmines, and even if you take out the obstacles like the barbed wire and all those other things that they like to put out there to slow enemy advances and charges across, you still got to come over some horribly rugged terrain created by the shelling. So even the same tools that help remove the man-made obstacles create obstacles of their own. And of course, the other problem with the trenches, especially in bad weather, is things like trench foot. If you get in even low standing water, you can't keep your feet dry. You get all sorts of complications from that. Disease would be rampant down there because you are trapped in close quarters in areas that were often filled with blood, human waste, gore, stuff like that, especially during very active periods of combat. They did have a rotation system in place, so people on the front line would rotate to the back and everybody else would move forward. And then people were rotated in and out of the trench systems entirely. So it's not like one group of poor schmucks were stuck in the front line trench all the time, but a lot of them were still in trenches even if they were subsequent layers, and a lot of the same problems still occurred. You just didn't have the immediate threat. Let's continue.
As the trenches slowly turn to mud and they quickly start to flood. That's the way it's in every corner. It's the guy in the mud for the treasures of blood. Descend into darkness. 303 days below the sun. Fields of Verdun. And the battle has begun. Nowhere execution, turned to wasteland from the grass. Thou shalt go no further, it was said, they shall not pass. The spirit of resistance and the madness of the war. So go ahead, face it and join the dead, though you die where you lie, never asking why.
We're going to go back and just redo that little section real fast. Let's see here.
Fields of execution, turn to wasteland from the grass. Thou shalt go no further, it was said, they shall not pass. The spirit of resistance and the madness of the war. So go ahead, face it and join the dead, though you die where you lie, never asking why.
All right, so fields of execution turned to wasteland from the grass. Yeah, again, that's a reference to destruction of the green fields of France. Terrible destruction. There are places throughout the areas affected by World War I and World War II to this day where you can see the remnants of the destruction. Now, the plants have grown back over many of these areas, but you can still see where a lot of this was pockmarked by the craters and so on. And we did talk about the Zone Rouge earlier on. They do make a reference here to They Shall Not Pass. That's not from the Lord of the Rings. That's from the Fields of Verdun. That's from World War I. That was Nivelle, I believe, is the one that said that. It was the spirit of resistance, as they say. Although I do have one little quibble. Though you die where you lie, never asking why, that's not accurate at all. It's patriotic, and I don't want to diminish that, but if you look at the letters and journals of a lot of these soldiers that served in World War I, and any war, but especially World War I, one we're talking about, you will find plenty of them, quite frankly, asking why. Why are we here? Why are we dying? Why are we fighting? This isn't our fight. Why are we involved here in France when all this started down in the Balkans? It's their problem, not ours. A lot of them absolutely were asking why. But I get what they're trying to go for here. It is a sense of patriotism, this idea of putting their life on the line for their country. And as we saw in the video on about the French soldiers earlier this week, they absolutely believed in fighting for their country. But that doesn't mean they weren't asking, why are we doing this in the first place? Why is the fighting here? Why are we under attack? This isn't our fight. We didn't start this. Why is this happening? That was a reality. They were very much asking that. Let me see anything else there we need to talk about. Let me scan through these lyrics real quick. Now, most of the rest of it we pretty well covered already.
Fields of Verdun, and the battle has begun. Nowhere to run, father and son fall one by one under the gun. Now you will be done, and the judgment has begun. Nowhere to run, father and son fall one by one. Fields of Verdun.
Okay, the Battle of Verdun lasted 303 days and was the longest active battle in history. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the Great War, with over 700,000 casualties. The battle became a strong symbol for the French resistance, along with the words "On ne passe pas," they shall not pass. Yep. Again, wasn't that Neville? I think it was Neville that said that. I always confuse him with Neville, for obvious reasons. I'm going to add one last thing to this that doesn't get talked about as much. When we're talking about Verdun, we also have to talk about things like, what was it? Voie Sacrée, the Sacred Way. This was a crucial supply line in and out of the region where they were fighting, in and around Verdun. We tend to think of the Battle of Verdun as being kind of this localized fight around the city of Verdun, but it affected a lot of the surrounding region as well. There were several villages and farms that were completely lost during this fighting. And of course, you cannot sustain a war like this without a solid supply line that is capable of getting food and supplies in and get people who are too injured out, or to get medical assistance in, however you need to do that. Also to get reinforcements in and keep the rotation going. In this particular case, it was the Voie Sacrée, Sacred Way. And that's a part of a lot of military history that it's not as glamorous as the battles themselves, so people tend to just neglect that aspect of a lot of these battles. But logistics make or break military success. They really do. And it's not just this one. You have the Road of Life up in Leningrad, since I mentioned that earlier. That route that they built over Lake Ladoga to supply the people under siege in Leningrad. The same thing applies here with Verdun. You have the Voie Sacrée, this sacred way into the area to get much needed supplies in, to get people who are too injured out, that sort of thing. Not as glamorous, but it's every bit as important. And the people in war who have to deal with the logistical side of things, the engineers, the people who build the roads, the medical people, the transport people, are the unsung heroes of a lot of wars. The fighting CBs, the various engineering battalions, even the cartographer battalions. We don't think of that as glamorous or necessary, but it's a part of war. You got to know the lay of the land, and people have to go in there and chart it out, because very often, especially going further back when we didn't have satellite photography and imagery, maps had to be done on the ground by people on the site. These guys don't get enough credit for the risks that they take and the work that they do. So when we're looking at any major battle in history, especially the further back you go, remember the importance of the logistics and, remember the patriotism and the contribution to the people on that side of the military effort. The folks that make things happen. They get you the guns, the bullets, the bandages, the medicine, the reinforcements, and get the sick out. These guys are just as important. Anyway, thank you for joining me for that. As always, an incredible job by Sabaton. They always leave me feeling emotionally shocked. This one, not as much as some of the others, but maybe I'm just getting desensitized to Sabaton now. Or just because it's World War I and I go in expecting that. Whereas in some of these other videos, I didn't know what to expect, so they hit me harder. In any case, it's still a great job. Thank you guys for recommending this one. See y'all next week for another epic rap battle. I'm going to break my tradition of primarily dealing with history, because in the past couple of weeks, I've had what's approaching a ludicrous number of requests for Pennywise versus the Joker. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. so that we can move on from it. And don't get me wrong, I love Pennywise and I love the Joker. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'm just apologizing in advance that we're going to be taking a detour from history. But hey, my viewers asked for it. I will eventually deliver. And I've been getting so many requests this past week for that specific video that I might as well get it done. So we'll be here next Thursday for the Joker versus Pennywise. Make your bets now on who's going to win. See you then. Bye-bye.